The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Welcome back to Live and Let Live on the Logos Radio Network. I'm Gary Johnson. We are live on Sunday, April 14th, and you can hear us every Sunday night for 2 hours beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, and 6 Pacific. Archives of this program are available at logosradionetwork.com. In this hour, we're talking with Christopher Earl Strunk of Brooklyn, New York. He is the founder of the Association for Sovereign Home Rule Within. Their website is associationforsovereignhomerulewithin.org, but the easy way to find it is just to search for the term sovereign home rule. We're going to be talking about Christopher's adventures in courtroom land, I guess you would call it. He is a pro se litigant who has, I guess, gotten the attention of a few judges here and there, and we're going to talk about that. In particular, a judge who has just slapped him with a bill, I guess you'd say, for $177,000. Chris Strunk, welcome to Live and Let Live.
Thank you very much. This is the day before the glorious leader's grandfather is going to go after you there in Austin. I hear you're one of the 5 cities in the United States. I can't figure out why. But that, tomorrow, not only is it tax day, it's Kim Il-sung's birthday. And I was just wondering why, although Austin's nice, and Karl Rove lives there, which is reason enough to go after Austin. But, I don't need to practice in court. I'm well aware of what the court system is. It's one of the co-equal branches of every government. We've got politically, we elect our judges, and they have the duties under the state constitution equal and at arm's length with the executive and the legislature. I've done close to 60 or 70 cases since 1995, and that I learned early on that I had hired an attorney to represent me in a foreclosure case here in Brooklyn. He had gone to Brooklyn Law, and he refused to do any practice in Brooklyn. And I said, how come? You even went to Brooklyn Law. He says, that's why I don't go to Brooklyn. Brooklyn's the 3rd largest city in the country. I'm trying to get home rule for Brooklyn, break loose of the city charter. And here in Democrat land, I became a Republican because I figured I would be left alone. And that, and the problem is that there's so few Republicans in Brooklyn that the Democrats bribe Republicans to get on the Republican ballot so that they can run as Republicans against the Democrats. They just arrested about 6 or 7 county chairmen and various elected officials for kickbacks and bribery to get on to become city mayor. Yeah, I have a modest existence. I worked for an attorney. Actually, I worked for Carl E. Person, who ran for president in the last go-around, was on the ballot in a number of states as a libertarian. And that I was working almost full-time for him, and I decided to take on the usurper, the grand usurper, in September of 2008. And I could not both do the work for him and at the same time take on the duties of going after, in both federal and state court, Obama and crew. And so I took early Social Security. I've been on Social Security ever since. So that I just want to emphasize that I'm not independently wealthy. I have my share of dandelion soup, and that everything I do is dependent upon my 4th Wednesday of the month and whatever people do to help me pay my fees. Like I have 3 or 4 motions coming up, $45 a piece on fees. I've got and two $60 notices of appeal that need to be filed. I've got what I practice judicial politics. Let's put it that way. That I can do things that attorneys can't do because they're fearful for their living.
Well, Christopher, let me ask you about something that happened very recently. I don't know if this is the part of the original 2008 case you were talking about, but you challenged the eligibility of Barack Obama to be president, and a judge, he took umbrage, I guess, at your lawsuit, and he had some choice words to say about you, and he also has sent you a bill, and I believe it's $177,000. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Basically, I had. It wasn't enough. I know all the other attorneys who are suing Obama on his eligibility. I've always taken the position that he has already admitted, as an admission against interest, that he is not. He has a British subject father, and that in itself makes him ineligible. Now, I filed a case in Federal Eastern District in October 2008. The judge said, doesn't belong here, go to state court. I did. So I challenged the Electoral College members, both the Republicans and Democrats, in that they were holding two jobs for pay. And I put that before a judge, and the judge essentially said, if the legislature says you can hold two jobs for pay, that's fine. And that I had also a companion complaint, which I needed what's called the law of the case to be established. Was there not a constitutional a challenge under state constitutional basis? And I asked him for a subpoena of Obama's mother's passport records, and he said, "Look, they're just going to quash that. Why don't you just go down there to Washington and get it?" And I filed a FOIA in November 22nd of 2008 for Stanley and Dunham's passport records, and 2 years later, in July of 2010, after battling it out with Kenneth Starr's buddy Richard Leon, who was a judge down in D.C., I get a letter from the Department of State saying, "Well, we've got 5 records here, and unfortunately, we destroyed all the rest." And in the first record, which was 1967 sworn affidavit by Stanley and Sotoro in Jakarta, Indonesia, before our vice consul to our embassy there, that her son was no longer to be on her passport and that his name was Subarka. Now that was an eye opener, and the fact that the general counsel to the Department of State said to me that the General Services Administration had ordered them to destroy her other records. So, that's a story which has a chapter in itself if I ever write a book.
Right.
But
Christopher, I want to ask you about the Stanley and Dunham passport moment.
Well, let me complete my story here, because this is a stock necessary. So I went back before the judge in the complaint case in 2010, and I said, "Look, I now have information that I want to do a first amended complaint on the companion case that I had filed in 2008. And he said, "Well, look, why don't you just file a new case?" And he asked me a series of questions, because I had listed all the defendants, including McCain. And he said, "Well, McCain, that's interesting. You voted for McCain." "Yes, I voted for McCain." And he says, "Well, when did you discover that he was not, that in fact he was not born in the Canal Zone, but in the city of Cologne?" Yeah. Which under the treaty made him not natural born because he was born in a foreign country. I said I found that out in July. He said, "Well, he says, well, you have standing. Why don't you go file another case, a new one, rather than amend?" So I filed one.
The judge said you had standing? Wait a minute, I've never heard a judge say anybody has standing. They usually say nobody has standing. That's amazing to me.
See, I was trying to amend the case before him, and he asked me a series of questions, and he said to me, and the Attorney General man was there, from State Attorney General, and he said, "Look, now you've got to be very clear on this, and you're under oath. When did you discover he was born in Cologne as opposed to Canal Zone?" And I said, "In July." He says, "Well, then you have standing." That's what he said. Now, he had a proposed amended complaint, which listed Zbigniew Brzezinski and all the people who are Obama. Obama is not who you think he is. Obama is a very neat consortium of both what you would consider left and right, which don't exist, but in fact, the world is arranged top down versus bottom up. I'm part of the bottom up crowd. There's no left and right per se. That's all an invention to get your eye off the ball. So anyway, I filed the case. By the time I got it put together with 33 defendants in March of 2011, I didn't have enough money after paying the fees and printing it up and everything else to buy what's called a request for judicial intervention, which is signed to the judge. So basically, I let that sit until I could get my next paycheck, my next fourth Wednesday check, and I started serving. And it took me the full 120 days to serve. But in May, John McCain's attorney came in out of Washington and essentially committed perjury, saying there was no related case, and it got assigned to Judge Shack. And Shack is a political hack. He is the darling of Amy Goodman of Democracy Now!, the Socialist International, and that he is an elected judge, and he is a grandstanding, self-aggrandizing sinecure of the Democratic Party and the Socialists, who, in fact, was who sued the state to get a pay raise. You know, that he was complaining. He went from being a teacher to a judge, and I guess he hadn't found out by now that government service is called government service, not called government enrichment. So that he always was pushing for the pay raise. Every time there was a transcript, he was always moaning about his lack of pay. So I'm just giving you a sense of who this fellow is and what he represents, as opposed to the other judge I had, Judge Schmidt, who is a gentleman.
Okay. All right, Christopher, we're coming up on a break here, and we'll let you tell us more about the political hack, author Shack. We're talking with Christopher Earl Strunk. His website is www.strunk.ws. That's STRUNK, and then .ws. He is the founder of the Association for Sovereign Home Rule Within. Their website is Association for Sovereign Home Rule Within.org. And we're talking about his efforts in court to challenge the eligibility of Barack Obama and John McCain to be president. You're listening to Live and Let Live on the Logos Radio Network. I'm Gary Johnson.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.